Hello and welcome to Stories of Science. Here, we look back on humanity's long journey to understand the world. The questions, the failures, and the breakthroughs that slowly changed how we see the universe and ourselves. We tell science as stories.
Saturn was never what we thought, and we're only just realizing it. 1610. An Italian scientist pointed a telescope at the night sky and immediately thought something was wrong, because Saturn looked like it had ears. He cleaned the lenses again and again, convinced the telescope was broken. Then a few years later, those strange shapes vanished completely. That confused astronomer was Galileo Galilei. And honestly, Saturn is still confusing humanity today. Because this planet is not normal, not even close. For starters, if you could find an ocean big enough, Saturn would actually float in water. Sounds fake. It isn't. This monster is over 120,000 kilometers wide and large enough to fit more than 700 Earths inside it, yet its average density is lower than water. And that's just the beginning. Its famous rings stretch nearly 300,000 kilometers across, almost the distance between Earth and the Moon, but in some places they're only a few dozen meters thick. From far away, they look elegant. Up close, they look like the universe's biggest ice-covered traffic accident. Then NASA took a closer look, and things got weird fast. Saturn's winds can reach 1,800 kilometers per hour, faster than many airplanes. And at the North Pole, there's a giant storm shaped like a perfect hexagon. Not kind of a hexagon. An actual hexagon. So precise that scientists first wondered if the images were glitched. But the creepiest discoveries weren't on Saturn itself, they were on its moons. Titan has rivers, lakes, seas, and rain. The catch: it rains liquid methane. Then there's Enceladus. This tiny icy moon blasts giant plumes of water into space, and probes detected organic molecules inside them, the kind of chemistry that could support life. Which means somewhere, billions of kilometers from the sun, beneath the frozen crust of a moon, there may be a hidden ocean. Maybe even something alive. And here's the wildest part: most of these discoveries were made in just the last 20 years. So humanity hasn't figured out Saturn. If anything, we've only just opened the door. For ancient civilizations, Saturn was a deeply unsettling object. Not because it was bright, not because it was dangerous. Because it moved way too slowly. The Babylonians noticed it thousands of years ago. Later, the Greeks realized the same thing: Saturn didn't behave like the other planets. Mars raced across the sky, Jupiter kept moving. Saturn crawled. It takes more than 29 years to orbit the Sun. A kid could see Saturn in elementary school, and by the time it returned to roughly the same spot in the sky, they'd practically be middle-aged. So many ancient cultures treated it like the edge of the heavens. The Romans named it Saturn, the god of agriculture and time. Honestly, fitting name. This planet takes its sweet time. And for centuries, that was all humanity knew. Then came 1609. A Dutch invention started spreading across Europe: the telescope. The next year, Galileo Galilei built his own upgraded version and pointed it at the sky. And suddenly, the universe cracked open. The moon wasn't smooth. Jupiter had 4 tiny companions. The Milky Way was made of countless stars. Then in July 1610, Galileo looked at Saturn and froze. Something was wrong with it. The planet had strange shapes sticking out on both sides, not moons, not stars. He later described Saturn as a sphere with handles. Translated into modern language: why does this planet have ears? The problem was, Galileo's telescope was terrible by today's standards. Honestly, some tourist binoculars are probably better. So he couldn't tell what he was seeing. Then things got even stranger. In 1612, he looked again. The ears were gone. Completely gone. Galileo was baffled. In a letter, he even joked: has Saturn devoured its children? Funny now, terrifying back then. What actually happened? Saturn's rings had turned edge-on toward Earth, becoming nearly invisible. But people in the 1600s had no concept of planetary rings. The idea that a planet could have something surrounding it sounded absurd. So for decades, astronomers across Europe kept guessing. Maybe Saturn was 3 planets stuck together, maybe giant moons were attached to it, maybe telescopes just didn't work properly. For the first time, humanity realized something important. the universe might be far stranger than expected. Then, in 1655, Christian Huygens entered the story. This guy was basically the 17th century version of a genius cheat code. Astronomy, physics, math. He even invented the pendulum clock later on. Huygens built a much stronger telescope and looked at Saturn again. Finally, the mystery broke. Saturn was surrounded by a thin, flat ring that didn't touch the planet itself. Humanity had solved the planet with ears. And in the same year, Huygens also discovered Titan, the moon that would one day shock scientists with methane rain and alien seas. But back then, nobody realized what had really happened. They thought they'd solved a puzzle. In reality, they had opened a door. Because as telescopes improved over the next centuries, Saturn kept getting weirder. The rings weren't smooth, they had gaps, layers, or ripples, like grooves on a vinyl record. Then in 1675, Giovanni Domenico Cassini discovered a massive dark gap splitting the rings apart. Today we call it the Cassini division. And that discovery changed everything, because it meant Saturn's rings weren't one solid structure at all. They were far more complicated than humanity ever imagined. For centuries, people thought Saturn's rings were solid, one giant cosmic hula hoop. I mean, from Earth they look smooth, clean, almost too perfect, like somebody added special effects to the planet. But here's the thing about the universe, it loves proving us wrong. In 1859, James Clerk Maxwell, yes, that Maxwell, the guy behind modern electromagnetism, decided to study Saturn's rings using math. And he found something weird. If the rings were solid, gravity would tear them apart. If they were liquid, they'd still be unstable. So he reached a wild conclusion. Saturn's rings had to be made of countless tiny particles. At the time, that sounded ridiculous. Then NASA finally got a close look. Turns out Maxwell nailed it. Saturn's rings aren't really rings. They're more like the biggest traffic jam in the solar system. Ice chunks, rock fragments, dust. Some pieces are as small as grains of sand, others are the size of mountains. All of them racing around Saturn at insane speeds. The whole thing looks less like jewelry and more like a shattered ice machine spinning through space. And those rings are bright, really bright. Scientists later discovered they're mostly made of water ice, with some regions over 90% pure. That's why Saturn shines so dramatically. Sunlight hits the ice and the rings light up like a giant cosmic lead strip. Then in 1979, Pioneer 11 flew past Saturn and revealed something even stranger. The rings weren't one structure, they were layered. A ring. B ring. C ring. Then darker ones, D, E, F, and G. Astronomers basically named them like a teacher taking attendance. And between them, gaps everywhere. The most famous is the Cassini division, discovered by Giovanni Domenico Cassini in 1675. At first people assumed it was empty space. Nope. There's still material in there, just less of it. Because Saturn's rings aren't static at all. They're a giant moving system controlled by gravity. The main culprit is something called gravitational resonance. Sounds complicated, but it's basically cosmic traffic flow. If a moon orbits Saturn in just the right rhythm, its gravity repeatedly tugs on certain ring particles. Over time, those particles get pushed away or rearranged, creating gaps and waves. Kind of like traffic jams that appear for no obvious reason. And then things get even weirder. Some tiny moons actually herd the rings into shape. Scientists call them shepherd moons. Prometheus and Pandora act like cosmic sheepdogs, using gravity to keep ring particles from drifting away. As a result, Saturn's rings twist into bizarre shapes, ripples, braids, even giant knots. When Voyager 1 photographed the F ring in 1980, scientists were stunned. It didn't even look like a ring anymore. It looked whipped, tangled, and broken. Then came the real game changer in 2004, Cassini-Huygens. Once Cassini started taking close-up images, NASA scientists basically began zooming in like detectives in a crime movie. The detail was unbelievable. Some regions had spiral waves that looked like ripples on water, others formed long clumps nicknamed straw structures because they resembled bundles of hay. And the scale is just absurd. Saturn's rings stretch over 280,000 kilometers wide, but in many places they're only 10 to 30 meters thick. If you shrank the rings down to the size of a football stadium, their thickness would be about the thickness of a sheet of paper, one of the thinnest giant structures in the solar system. And then scientists realized something even stranger. The rings might not be ancient at all. People originally thought they formed alongside Saturn 4.5 billion years ago, but Cassini found the rings were too bright, too clean. If they'd been sitting there for billions of years, space dust should have darkened them long ago. Instead, they still look fresh. So now many scientists think Saturn's current rings may be surprisingly young, maybe only 100 million years old. Which means when dinosaurs walked Earth, Saturn may not have looked like Saturn at all. The version we see today might basically be a temporary cosmetic skin. And it gets worse. The rings are slowly disappearing. Ice particles are being pulled into Saturn along magnetic field lines in a process called ring rain. Little by little, Saturn is swallowing its own rings. NASA estimates that hundreds of millions of years from now, the rings could fade dramatically or vanish entirely, which means humanity may have arrived at exactly the right moment in cosmic history, the era when Saturn looks its absolute best. Saturn has a talent for fooling people. From far away, it looks calm, soft yellow colors, smooth rings, elegant, like the aristocrat of the solar system. But don't judge a book by its cover, because up close, Saturn is less of a planet, and more like a giant rolling nightmare. First of all, Saturn has no solid surface. None. You can't stand on it, you can't land on it, you definitely can't plant a flag and claim it for humanity. If you tried, you'd just keep falling forever. NASA has actually studied what would happen if a human fell into Saturn. Short version, you would die in layers. Saturn is a gas giant, completely different from rocky planets like Earth. It's made mostly of hydrogen and helium, basically the same ingredients as the Sun. The only difference is, Saturn never became a star. It's like the universe is almost. Despite being about 95 times more massive than Earth and large enough to fit over 700 Earths inside it, Saturn still isn't heavy enough to ignite nuclear fusion. That's the magic trick stars pull off. They squeeze hydrogen so hard that atoms fuse and release energy. That's why the Sun shines. Saturn came close, but not close enough. Scientists estimate that if Saturn were around 80 times more massive, it could have become a true star. And if it were only somewhat bigger, it might have become a brown dwarf, basically a failed star that almost made the team. Astronomers sometimes joke that Saturn is a student who didn't pass the Sun exam. But even as a failed star, Saturn is terrifying inside. Imagine diving into it in a spacecraft. At first, it might seem peaceful. The upper atmosphere is thin, creamy yellow, almost beautiful. Then things start going sideways. The winds intensify, the pressure climbs, the sky darkens. You'd pass through clouds of ammonia ice, then deeper toxic layers, then enormous water cloud regions hidden far below. Yes, Saturn may contain water deep inside, just under conditions so extreme it barely resembles anything on Earth. Keep falling, and the pressure becomes hundreds, then thousands of times stronger than Earth's atmosphere. Eventually your spacecraft begins to crumple. Because Saturn stops feeling like air. It starts feeling like an ocean. A global ocean made of hydrogen. And then comes the truly bizarre part, liquid hydrogen. Normally hydrogen is a gas inside Saturn. Pressure squeezes it into liquid form. An endless sea of compressed hydrogen stretching for thousands of kilometers. Deeper still, scientists think there may be metallic hydrogen. Sounds like science fiction. It's real. Under crushing pressure, hydrogen's electrons break free, turning the material into an electrically conducting fluid, basically liquid metal made from the simplest element in the universe. Jupiter likely has even more of it, but Saturn may contain it too. And the temperatures, absolutely insane. The cloud tops sit around 178 degrees C. Freezing cold. But near the core, temperatures may exceed 10,000 degrees Celsius, close to the surface temperature of the Sun itself. So Saturn is basically a cosmic monster. Frozen on the outside, hotter than lava on the inside. And the wildest part? Scientists still don't fully know what Saturn's interior really looks like. We've sent Pioneer 11, Voyager 1, Voyager 2, and Cassini-Huygens to study it. We've measured, photographed, calculated. But everything we know still comes from the outer layers. Because Saturn hides its real secrets deep below the clouds. And strangely enough, NASA's biggest headache isn't even Saturn's interior. It's the atmosphere above it. If you've ever been through a 300 km/h hurricane on Earth, you know the drill: stay inside, news warnings everywhere, and anything not nailed down becomes a projectile. But on Saturn, that would just be a slightly windy afternoon. Near Saturn's equator, winds can hit 1,800 km/h. That's faster than most jets, and even faster than the speed of sound. In other words, Saturn doesn't have weather. It has a planet-sized breakdown. And the strange part, these storms don't come and go. They stick around. On Earth, weather is powered by the sun, but Saturn is too far away. Sunlight there is weak, almost dim like a cloudy day. So the real engine is inside the planet itself. Leftover heat from its formation is still slowly leaking out, driving the atmosphere into constant chaos. Think of Saturn like a pressure cooker that never fully cooled down. When Voyager 1 flew past in 1980, it saw the atmosphere up close for the first time, and it looked like a giant cosmic blender. Swirls everywhere, jet streams colliding, storms stacked on storms. It didn't look like a planet. It looked like boiling milk in space. Then there's lightning. Earth lightning is already dramatic. Saturn's version? Completely on another level. Since 2004, Cassini-Huygens detected super lightning storms releasing energy equal to thousands of Earth lightning bolts at once. And they don't just flash for seconds, they can last for months. Sometimes nearly a year. Scientists call one of the biggest recurring storms the Great White Spot. Every 30 years, Saturn basically reboots its weather with a massive planet-wide storm. First recorded in 1876, it showed up again in 1933, 1960, 1990, and then exploded in 2010, growing so large it nearly wrapped around the entire planet. Yes, the whole planet. Scientists later estimated the energy released was greater than all of Earth's nuclear weapons combined. And just when things couldn't get weirder, Saturn's North Pole showed something almost unbelievable. In 1981, Voyager 2 spotted a strange shape, but the images were too blurry to understand. Then in 2006, Cassini came back with crystal-clear data, and scientists had to double-check reality. At the pole, there was a perfect hexagon. Not kind of. Not an illusion. A clean, stable, geometric six-sided storm. About 30,000 kilometers wide, big enough to swallow 4 Earths. At first, people thought it was artificial. It looked too perfect, like someone drew it with a ruler. But physics had another answer. It's actually a rare atmospheric jet stream pattern. High-speed winds circle the pole, and under just the right conditions, the flow stabilizes into a hexagon instead of a circle. Strange, but real. In 2013, scientists even recreated a similar effect in lab experiments using rotating fluids. So yes, it's fluid dynamics, just pushed to planetary extremes. And inside that hexagon sits another monster, a giant hurricane with an eye almost the size of Earth. The whole system looks like Saturn installed a permanent engine at its North Pole. Even stranger, later Cassini images showed the region turning golden like a glowing mechanical core. Honestly, it looks less like a planet, and more like something out of science fiction. And while scientists were still trying to understand that hexagon, they realized something even bigger. Saturn's most extreme secrets might not even be on Saturn itself, but on its moons. Let's set Saturn's moons aside for a moment and talk about its rings. From Earth, they look eternal, like a perfect cosmic logo stamped onto the sky. Stable, clean, timeless. But here's the truth: nothing in the universe stays perfect forever. Not even Saturn's rings. In 1980, Voyager 1 flew past Saturn and picked up something strange. Hydrogen in the upper atmosphere wasn't behaving normally, as if something was falling in. Back then, nobody could explain it. Decades later, Cassini-Huygens finally solved the mystery. Saturn's rings were literally raining down. But not water ice. Tiny particles from the rings slowly escape, pulled by gravity and magnetic forces, and fall into Saturn's atmosphere. Scientists call it ring rain. Sounds poetic. In reality, it's the rings slowly bleeding into the planet. Estimates suggest tons of material fall in every second. Imagine a 280,000 kilometer wide structure, slowly evaporating into space like an hourglass running out of time. And it gets worse. Space isn't clean. It's full of dust and micrometeor impacts. Over time, that pollution darkens the rings. So here's the paradox: if Saturn's rings were truly billions of years old, they should be dark by now, almost black. But they're still bright. Almost too bright. Like they were just cleaned yesterday. That led scientists to a bold idea: maybe the rings are young. In 2017, during its final dives between Saturn and the rings, Cassini measured their mass directly for the first time. The results were surprising. The rings are lighter than expected, meaning they may be much younger than we thought. Some studies suggest they could be only around 100 million years old. In other words, when dinosaurs walked the Earth, Saturn might not have even had these rings yet. So the T-Rex could have looked up at Saturn, but not this version of it. And that's the shocking part. We tend to think the solar system is frozen in time, like an ancient museum, but it's not. It's constantly changing, collapsing, rebuilding. And Saturn's rings might just be a cosmic accident, possibly created when a moon got too close, was ripped apart, and left behind a glowing debris field. In simple terms, a billion-year traffic accident frozen in orbit. And it won't last forever. NASA predicts that in a few 100 million years, the rings could fade dramatically, or disappear completely. Future civilizations might look up at Saturn and see nothing special at all. Just another gas giant. No rings. No spectacle. Which leads to a strange thought. We might be ridiculously lucky. Because out of 4.5 billion years of solar system history, we're living in the one era where Saturn looks its absolute best. A few hundred years ago, Saturn was basically a mystery with no instructions. When Galileo Galilei pointed his telescope at it, he saw something strange: a planet with ears. He had no idea it was rings. None at all. And he definitely couldn't imagine what would come next. Because today, we've sent spacecraft through Saturn's atmosphere, mapped its magnetic field, and even flown through gaps in its rings. Back then, humanity hadn't even invented the steam engine. Now we know Saturn has ice rings, a giant hexagon storm at its north pole, winds faster than sound, methane seas on Titan, and possibly a hidden ocean under the ice of Enceladus, maybe even the right conditions for life. And here's the wild part: Saturn is over 1.4 billion kilometers away. Light takes more than an hour to get there. Yet somehow, a species that evolved on an African savanna looked up and figured it out, then built machines that took photos of it. In 2004, Cassini-Huygens arrived after a 7-year journey and 3.5 billion kilometers traveled, finally slipping into orbit. All because a few people on Earth asked a simple question: what's it like out there? And that question changed everything. Because the universe doesn't care about us, Saturn didn't slow down for humanity. Its storms were spinning long before dinosaurs existed, and they'll likely keep going long after we're gone. That's what makes this so strange. We are tiny, short-lived, fragile. Take us off Earth for a few minutes and we're done. And yet, somehow, we learned to understand the universe. From stone tools to rockets in just a few thousand years, basically no time at all on a cosmic scale. In that blink of time, we built math, physics, discovered gravity, figured out stars, and then started asking why Saturn's rings rain. That's not just intelligence. That's something closer to a miracle of civilization. Even stranger? The universe actually lets us understand it. Saturn's orbits, storms, and gravity all follow rules we can write down with math, like the cosmos was built to be decoded. From Galileo's blurry view to NASA's crystal-clear images, it took just 400 years. 400 years less than 14 Saturn years. And in that tiny slice of time, we went from Saturn has ears to there might be a hidden ocean under Enceladus. Sometimes the real wonder isn't Saturn at all. It's that something on Earth actually figured it out.
The people who change the world usually just think one step deeper. If this story made you see things differently, hit like, subscribe, and save it. See you in the next story.